that first game is always tough to prepare for that home opener because you only got the preseason game and last year's film. I think it is probably more of an advantage to both teams that we played in January. So at least the last you know things that they were doing last year was against us, and we get to see their most recent game plans. We've also played them a lot in the last few years, so there's a little bit of familiarity there. I think if anything, it's probably better for us, more comfortable for us to deal with a team that we've played multiple times. We just recently played, because it's not like they're going to throw out their whole playbook in the offseason.
I'm sure you've run into situations over your career where you didn't know who your next opponent's quarterback was going to be. It'd be like one guy or the other. How much does that actually mean in terms of extra preparation for that opponent?
Well, I think it just depends on the styles of the quarterbacks. I think, some guys like, for last week, for instance, you go from, Tyrod Taylor to Baker Mayfield. And although they're both mobile quarterbacks, Baker's a lot more elusive in the pocket. He's a creator on the move, and so you got to start to think about those things. And so if you got like a Tom Brady-ish quarterback, but then his backup is a mobile quarterback, those are two different game plans that you got to work for. But if they're similar bodies, then it doesn't matter.
But it does add a certain level of extra annoyance in terms of having to prepare for two different guys. No.
I guess it just depends, but not really.
Yeah. Okay.
What have you seen out of this defense this preseason now that the starters are all but done?
I think what we look for is consistency. We've seen growth in every game. Guys played really well in the first one. The second one against the Patriots, we had a few penalties that extended drives, but for the most part, felt like we played pretty well. Last week, we played really well in situations, but made it a little bit harder on ourselves with some missed tackles, and so hopefully we continue to identify some of these weak areas, improve on them the next week, and keep getting better.
Doug has talked about dealing with complacency and dealing with winning. What steps has he taken, or have you guys taken? He said at one point he wants to push everyone even harder coming off the Super Bowl. Has that been the case when you kind of look at this summer overall?
I mean, we work. It'd be hard for me to think that anybody outworks us, and I think that's just the culture that we've created in the weight room and on the practice field. That's just what we do. I think the biggest thing is understanding that this team is going to be different than last year's teams. We have new guys. Just the dynamics of it all is different, and so we can't expect to have those same results by just walking on the field. You got to treat being 13-3 the same as being 9-7, and that same mentality that we had last year has got to be the same way we approach this year. So, and that's a difficult thing to do when you got the Super Bowl sign in your locker room, but it's one of those things that we've been putting a lot of focus on.
It just constantly comes up in the messaging and meetings and that kind of thing. You kind of harp on it a lot. Is that how you sort of get it kind of imprinted in everyone's
Well, I
head?
think the biggest thing is, like I said, you maintain your standards and culture of working hard, of preparing, and then you create an environment that's highly competitive. And I think when you do that, you're constantly getting better, or you're getting exposed, and that's what we've done.
So how would you compare the generalized mood and attitude from this time last year compared to this time this year?
Well, I think it's again, I think if you get caught up in comparing last year to this year, you run into panicking or deceiving yourselves. I think right now we're still evaluating a lot of players. I think offensively, I think they've had a little bit of frustrations, but that's part of the preseason, trying to figure out what works, what doesn't, who's going to make the team, who's not overly concerned there. But the biggest thing as a team, I think we're trying to figure out who's going to be on the 53 when it comes to some of the injuries, when we will get guys back, and how we'll adjust as a team to make sure that we're winning games.
You mentioned that environment, that kind of ethos. When you look at the teams that have been able to kind of sustain success beyond the Super Bowl, like the Steelers, Patriots, obviously. What do you think the biggest characteristic of those teams is? Is it that environment? Is it the head coach? Is it the quarterback? Is it the guys in the locker room, front office?
I mean, I think it's a culture. The culture is not just one person. It's something that, sustains no matter who's in the building, who leaves, who comes. And that's, I think, the hardest thing to do in the NFL is to build a culture that lasts, because you have so much turnover in coaches and players every single year. And so when you look at teams like the Steelers, the Patriots, those are teams that have a well-defined culture of how they're going to play, what their scheme is and what they expect out of their players. And you look at the Patriots, they're a very disciplined team. They're not going to beat themselves. They don't always have the most talented players, but it doesn't matter, because they're going to know what to do, where to be, and how to do their jobs. And if not, you just won't be there. So I think, that's one of the things that we've been trying to create here is a culture of consistency, one that takes pride in having tough, hard-nosed players that are smart, know what to do, and that compete, at all areas of the game. And, hopefully this last week we'll continue to figure out and identify who fits that mold and see what this team will look like.
Now, you mentioned that this week is kind of almost like, I'm not saying a week off for the starters, but you can kind of, well, no, I mean, my point is that you have 3 extra days, and this year you don't, because you're playing on a Thursday. Mm-hmm. Is the urgency coming a little earlier than usual because of that?
No. I mean, usually after that third preseason game, from a starter standpoint, all your focus turns to your week 1 opponent. We play on a Thursday, so yeah, we lose those extra 3 days of rest, whatever it is. But no, it's definitely not a week off. We've been practicing pretty hard with the starters to get, I guess help with a little bit of conditioning, or just make this a heavy workload week, knowing that we have a little bit more rest, and then it'll be a normal work week next week.
So you weren't surprised? Can I just follow up? So you weren't surprised when the pads were on yesterday?
No. I mean, still, I guess technically still in training camp. But I mean, during the season, on a normal Wednesday, we have on pads. So we're on the in-season schedule at this point, so Wednesdays as usual.
So how much does veteran leadership have Doug's ear in terms of when to press, when to back off? When you have guys have a committee that can talk to Doug on a regular basis and have input?
Yeah, I mean, last year during the season, since Doug has been here, every week he meets with the leaders. We haven't done as much in training camp, but I anticipate as the season goes on, every week we meet with him. He'll, let us know where he's at, what he's thinking. We can give him kind of the vibe of the locker room, where we're at, if we need to back off, if we need to ramp it up. Which is why, last year, late in the year, players were asking to put the pads on, because we wanted to work on our run fits and work on the work in the trenches, and he obliged. And so it's a lot of that back and forth. He gives us the latitude to be able to have input.